Hello, I'm Jonasz Lewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. As always, I hope you enjoy the journey. Now, on this episode, we dive into a topic that's as alarming as it is underreported: the growing threat of the Islamic State in Khorasan Province, or ISKP, in Central Asia. Yes, while most of the world's attention is focused on conflicts in Ukraine and the South China Sea, there is a brewing storm in the heart of Asia that could have far-reaching implications. As these extremists extend their reach, the risk of a broader regional outburst grows. What can be done to counter the threat of ISKP in Central Asia? We will try to answer that question today. But first, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
The Islamic State Khorasan Province, the terrorist group responsible for the March attack on a Moscow concert hall that killed over 140 people, is increasing its media outreach in Central Asia. The group's propaganda activities have heightened fears of potential terrorist attacks in the region. This tragic event in Moscow highlighted the serious transnational threat posed by the group. This attack was the group's third successful external operation in less than 3 months, following a suicide bombing in Kerman, Iran, and a shooting at a church in Istanbul, Turkey. ISKP is now calling for actions similar to the Moscow attack in Central Asia. With ISKP having established its strategy in Central Asia and successfully expanded its influence among regional radicals, its propaganda machine now operates in line with the group's previous external operations against Iran, Turkey and Russia. The group also portrays Uzbekistan as a Russian proxy and the Tajikistani government as a Russian puppet aiming to impose communism and eradicate Islam from the country. These efforts are supported by pro-ISKP media outlets that are now beginning to publish in regional languages, with the aim to expand its regional support base, recruit members and raise funds.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. So, what is ISKP and why should we care? ISKP, sometimes known as ISK, is a branch of the Islamic State, infamous for its brutality and extreme interpretations of Islam. Established in 2015, ISKP operates primarily in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but it's increasingly extending its reach into Central Asia. The region that includes countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. ISKP emerged from disenchanted Taliban members and other militant groups who found the Taliban's approach too lenient. Imagine that, the Taliban being considered too soft. These extremists found a common cause in the Islamic State's global jihad, and voila, ISKP was born. Their goal? To establish a caliphate in Khorasan, a historical region that covers parts of modern-day Iran, Central Asia, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now, why is ISKP targeting Central Asia? The answer lies in a mix of geography, politics and opportunity. Central Asia's proximity to Afghanistan makes it a natural target for spillover violence. The region is also marked by political instability, economic challenges and weak governance, making it fertile ground for extremist ideologies. Moreover, the withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan has created a power vacuum that groups like the ISKP are eager to fill. The impact of ISKP's activities is already being felt. In recent months, there have been numerous reports of cross-border attacks, recruitment drives, and propaganda aimed at Central Asian countries. ISKP is not just content with launching attacks, it aims to establish a foothold in these nations. This poses a direct threat to regional stability and security. One of the most alarming aspects of ISKP's strategy is its focus on recruitment. They are adept at exploiting local grievances, whether it's poverty, corruption, or ethnic tensions, to attract new followers. And let's not forget their sophisticated use of social media to spread their message and recruit individuals from far and wide. This digital jihad is proving to be disturbingly effective. Central Asian governments are scrambling to respond, but their efforts are often hampered by lack of resources, coordination and, frankly, political will. There have been some successes, however, these are often reactive rather than proactive measures. What is needed is a comprehensive strategy that addresses not just the symptoms, but the root causes of extremism. In conclusion, the rise of ISKP in Central Asia is a ticking time bomb that the world cannot afford to ignore. It is a complex issue that requires a multifaceted response, blending security measures with development initiatives and international cooperation. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Bruce Pannier, Central Asia Fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So the threat from the Khorasan branch of ISIS, just how serious is it at this stage? Because as we've already mentioned in the intro, this is not something that we tend to talk about a lot in the media, unless something happens. But unfortunately, after it happens, it is quickly forgotten. Is this a threat that we actually should pay more attention to, though?
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, they've certainly expanded their area of operations. This was a group that was a splinter from ISIS. That planted itself in the Pakistani tribal areas and in parts of Afghanistan, mostly in the east and the north. And now we see that they've been carrying out attacks in Turkey, Iran, Moscow. They've been arrested in Germany, Austria, France, ahead of the Olympics. And even Central Asia now is starting to say that they're having problems and have arrested several people. So, it's gone from a kind of a small group that was occupying very limited spaces in Afghanistan to one that's able to plan attacks globally.
Can you see any parallels between its evolution and that of Al-Qaeda? I mean, Al-Qaeda also started out as something that some people thought, we can just ignore it. It's just a small group of militants. They're not able to do anything serious. And then 9/11 came along.
Yeah, well, this is a good comparison. The one thing that I would say separates Al-Qaeda from the Islamic State of Khorasan Province, ISKP, today, is that ISKP seems to be a little bit more successful in getting the so-called lone wolf attackers, as well as being able to plan attacks involving small groups. So their appeal seems to be a little bit stronger than that of Al-Qaeda. Now, you might be able to explain that simply from the fact that social networks have expanded and there's a number of them now, and so the opportunities are much greater than they were for Al-Qaeda 20 years ago.
So now, looking at the environment in which this organization functions, can you tell us more about it, in particular about any rival groups which are inimical to its rise?
Well, of course, as I mentioned, the ISKP is based really in Afghanistan, and they target the Taliban. I mean, there's been battles between them and the Taliban going on for actually about 8 years now. That said, the Taliban have of course, promised, one of the first promises they made when they came to power was that they would not let their territory be used for attacks on neighboring states. So they have waged a campaign to eradicate ISKP. It hasn't been successful. It's interesting that ISKP has gone rather quiet inside Afghanistan, and yet we know that that's still their base, and they're able to plan attacks from inside Afghanistan and other countries. Again, in Europe, they've been trying to stage attack neighboring countries also. So the Taliban is one of the targets. But generally, the ISKP considers almost anyone but themselves to be a legitimate target. So it doesn't matter if you're a Muslim or non-Muslim government. They use their propaganda effectively against the Taliban to say, for instance, that the Taliban has a relationship with China and Russia, and both these are enemies of Islam. So this proves that the Taliban are an illegitimate government. They're not true Islamic government at all. Then ISKP makes the same claim about Tajikistan with the same reasoning, that the Tajik government depends on Russia and depends on China, and these are kufr, non-Islamic governments. So this just shows that the Tajik government is illegitimate too. Uzbekistan. So it's interesting about ISKP that they make no distinctions about who the enemy is. If you can be Islamic government, you can be not an Islamic government. You can be the government of an Islamic country, but a secular form of government. And they consider all those groups to be illegitimate governments, and that includes really all the militant groups in Afghanistan except for themselves, not just the Taliban, but there's other groups inside Afghanistan that are wandering around still to this day. The Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan is one, the Jamiat Ansarullah, which is basically a Tajik group, and ISKP targets them as much as they do the Taliban.
And making the Taliban seem almost respectable is quite an achievement, one could say, with a certain degree of irony. Now, the radical nature of this group, does it bode well for their future? I mean, we do not really want to wish them well, obviously, but would you say that there is a degree beyond which a group is simply not able to function properly, i.e. being so radical it may find problems with, for example, its recruitment drive, but also, as you've already mentioned, this hostility from all the other groups in the region? It considers everyone its enemy, apparently. So would you say that this might ironically be to our advantage as the international community, because it may prove for them to be difficult to grow beyond certain limits?
You know, this is a good point, and it's certainly an interesting question. You know, we've seen what happened in areas that ISIS that were under ISIS control in Syria and Iraq. You know, they're not very good at governing. I mean, they're a terrorist organization, and that's how they govern, by terror. You know, everyone is afraid for their lives all the time, so you pretty much toe the line because you're worried about what can happen to you. So they've proven themselves to be ineffective at governance. There's no doubt about that. But the people they're looking for are disaffected people. You know, I mentioned that they have a propaganda campaign targeting Tajiks, who are, of course, right next door in Tajikistan, and they seem to prey upon them, saying, you know, you have no opportunity. It's a family-run government. You can't know if you're smart, if you're talented, whatever. It doesn't matter, because the government will keep you down, have a chance to make anything out of yourselves. And they send the same message to Central Asian migrant laborers in Russia, too, that look at how you're being treated. You don't have a worthy life. You have no chance for a worthy life. Why do you want to keep doing this for yourself? Why not be part of something bigger? Why not join, you know, our group? We practice Sharia. There's a system of justice which is based on Islam. And you know, you instead of being a street sweeper in Moscow or St. Petersburg, you can be, you know, in the jihad. You can be a hero among the people and get to something better. And for a lot of people that are alone or in a small group that are far away from home, this message resonates with them. I mean, it's something that that sounds attractive to them, that they can be somebody. They don't have to just be a poorly paid laborer and do something with their future. And like I said, as absurd as that may sound to some people, when you're considering what they're offering, you know, come and be a suicide bomber or something like that. When you have no hope, all of a sudden this message sounds like it's possibly more attractive than what you have going in your own life.
Would you say the political environment in Central Asia and beyond makes this group more attractive to the average citizen? I mean, you've already mentioned that these countries are not exactly the perfect example of a democratic, inclusive government, right? So many social groups or individuals are likely to be excluded. So would you say that in trying to fight against this branch of the Islamic State, these governments, ironically, would also need to look in the mirror and think about how they govern, what they offer to their own citizens, and perhaps improve that before actually engaging the existing sleeper cells, which might have already been mushrooming just, you know, out of sight?
Yep. Yeah, I agree with this 100%. And I've made this point to people before, is you know, it is that feeling of hopelessness that is in a place like Tajikistan. You know, as I said, you can be the smartest person in the country, one of the smartest people in the world, you won't be able to get ahead in that situation. And I would even extend that beyond. The governments do need to change. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there has to be a feeling among the population that if they work hard, they can make it somehow, that they can improve their lives, the lives of their families. But there's not that feeling, certainly in a place like Tajikistan at the moment. But beyond that, there's a lot of governments that support and I'm sorry I'm picking on Tajikistan. This applies to a lot of governments, certainly in Central Asia. But, you know, Tajikistan has become one of these countries that's too important to fail, right? You know, we've seen what happened in Iraq when they overthrew the government, you know, 20 years ago, and it left a political void. We've seen what happened in areas where there's a political void in Syria also, where that's exactly the kind of environment that a group like ISKP thrives in, where there's total chaos and there is no order in there, and so they can get it in. So that means that in Central Asia, a government like Tajikistan, as corrupt as it is, everyone knows it's a family business, but the Chinese, the Russians, the West, all support them because they don't want the government to be overthrown and leave a political void like we saw in Iraq 20 years ago, where these groups can come in. So the Tajik government is propped up by bigger powers. And the Tajik government knows this, that they anytime they call for help and say we face a problem, a security threat, we might be overthrown, they can count on the fact that Russia, which has a military base in Tajikistan, or China, which has a very small base run by the People's Armed Police in the east, will certainly come to their aid right away and give them the money, the weapons, whatever they need to keep from being overthrown or keep from facing a serious security threat in the country. So it's really a no-win situation. One understands that you don't want that political void that I was talking about, this vacuum where there's no one in charge and someone like ISKP comes in and carves out territory, as we've seen ISIS do in Iraq and in Syria. On the other hand, these governments have to change and offer their people something some kind of hope that they can believe in, so that there's a reason to remain peaceful, keep working hard, and try to contribute to the country and the society with the not just the belief, but really the conviction that your work will pay off in the end, and you will improve your life and the life of your family, and your country will improve at the same time, and it'll be a place that you want to live in.
So Bruce Pannier was our guest today here on TVP World, explaining the intricacies of the organization, which, while not perhaps receiving as much coverage as it should, might unfortunately make the headlines in the near future. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you for inviting me.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a curated selection of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has reaffirmed Ukraine's irreversible path towards NATO membership, emphasizing that the alliance's ongoing commitments to Kyiv constitute a bridge to Ukraine's full integration.
During the recent NATO summit, several key decisions were made in support of Ukraine's membership aspirations. These include a minimum baseline funding commitment to 40 billion euros, the establishment of a new military command in Germany to train and equip Ukrainian troops, and additional air defense commitments. In a longer statement, the alliance welcomed the concrete progress Ukraine has made since the 2023 Vilnius summit on its required democratic, economic and security reforms. NATO is committed to continue to support its irreversible path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership. Kyiv, meanwhile, aims to arrange a second global peace summit before the US elections. The goal is to develop a new joint peace plan based on President Volodymyr Zelensky's 10-point peace proposal, while remaining open to input from other countries.
Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski said thousands of Ukrainians had registered for a newly established volunteer military unit in Poland. This initiative, known as the Ukrainian Legion, was officially created under a security agreement signed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
The Ukrainian Legion will consist of volunteers who will receive training and equipment in Poland, with substantial support from Ukraine's allies. Sikorski highlighted that while many are eager to support their homeland, they demand proper training and equipment before deployment. Poland's strategy includes preparing these volunteers and subsequently offering them to Ukraine as a cohesive unit, with the option to return after their rotation.
We have a historically significant security agreement.
President Zelensky has affirmed that those who join the Legion will have the opportunity to sign contracts with the Ukrainian armed forces, integrating them into the national defense structure. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov has also called on Ukrainians residing in Europe to join the Legion. The volunteers will undergo rigorous training in Poland, Lithuania and other EU countries, ensuring they are equipped with top-tier equipment provided by international partners to maximize their effectiveness on the battlefield.
The Prosecutor General's Office of Russia has officially designated the Moscow Times as undesirable, effectively banning Russian citizens from working with or maintaining any links to the news organization. Violators of this designation face criminal prosecution.
According to a statement from the Russian Prosecutor's General Office, the move was made because the outlet allegedly aims to discredit the Russian government's decisions in both foreign and domestic policy. Additionally, the office accused the Moscow Times of disseminating unreliable information that undermines the government's activities, particularly concerning the war in Ukraine. The designation not only holds the Moscow Times operations within Russia, but also places its staff members at risk of imprisonment. Engagement with the outlet is now a criminal offense. Independent news website Mediozana has reported that Russians have been fined merely for reposting links and articles from organizations deemed undesirable. The undesirable list was introduced by Moscow in 2015 as a means to curb the influence of foreign non-governmental organizations and prohibit Russians from collaborating with or donating to them. Since then, the law has been used to target various independent news outlets, human rights groups, environmental organizations, and educational institutions.
The 15th meeting of the Kazakhstan-EU dialogue platform saw significant interest from European Union representatives in developing the Middle Corridor. Ambassador of the EU to Kazakhstan, Kęstutis Jankauskas, and heads of EU diplomatic missions highlighted the importance of unlocking this transport route as a key discussion point.
The Kazakh Prime Minister press service noted that the meeting emphasized the Middle Corridor's role as a vital transit route, with 80% of goods from China to EU countries passing through Kazakhstan. The route's competitive delivery time of 12 to 15 days makes it an attractive option for trade. The European Union is a large and significant investment and trade partner of Kazakhstan. The EU accounts for over 40% of foreign trade-attracted investments and approximately 30% of foreign trade. In 2023, trade turnover between Kazakhstan and EU countries reached more than $40 billion, an almost 40% increase since 2019. EU investments in Kazakhstan's economy totaled $10.4 billion in the last year, with $2.8 billion invested in the first quarter of 2024, primarily from the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Cyprus and Luxembourg.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.